Hello and welcome to the Relationship Skills Podcast. My name is Madison Trudeau and I am a relationship skills coach. I help intimidating women just like you find and build healthy, sustainable relationships. If you have been looking for a podcast that teaches you how to find a life partner and keep a healthy relationship over time, you have come to the right place. As always, these videos are sponsored by my Relationship Toolbox sessions. If you are wanting a one-on-one with me and you want to learn more about the way you think about relationships, go to MadisonTrudeau.com/offers. For a limited time, you can get 50% off of a Relationship Toolbox session by using code AUTUMN. Last week, I talked about how you can know when you should date somebody and how you can know when you should marry someone. And I laid awake that night after recording that podcast, and I realized that there are so many milestones between deciding to date somebody and deciding to marry them. And so I wanted to do a podcast about all of the milestones in between. This could even become a series of podcast episodes about the milestones in a relationship. Today, I wanted to talk about the big ones. I want to talk about when to have sex. I want to talk about when to move in together. And I want to talk about when you should combine your finances or if you should ever combine your finances. And we will get into this today. I'm also going to talk about how you can use boundaries as filters when seeking out these relationships so that you know that you can trust someone to the best of your knowledge, so that you've used all of the tools that you have. I'm going to give you some tools to filter out men who want to take advantage of you. Now, the very first thing I think we should talk about is one of the very first things that sometimes happens in relationships as far as large milestones, and that is having sex. Now, I recommend that all of my clients not have sex within the first 6 months of a relationship. I usually give a window of 3 to 6 months, but 6 months is preferable. Now, this is because of two things. Number one, this is because of the puppy love phase that happens in every single relationship ever. The first 3 months are when you likely still have rose-colored glasses on, and you don't also know the person very well yet, so you can really struggle to see red flags. If you have sex before this marker, you can still have your rose-colored glasses on and you haven't given yourself enough time with this person to really know if you can trust them. Now, the second part of this is the hormone that is released in women when we have sex with someone. It's called oxytocin. Now, this is a bonding hormone. This is a hormone that is also released to help you bond with your infant when you give birth. Now, unfairly, this hormone is only really released in large amounts when men get to hold their infant child for the first time. We release this hormone when we have sex. Now, if you decide to have sex before that 3 to 6 month marker, no judgment. You do run the risk of heavily clouding your judgment and prolonging a relationship that is not in your best interest. Because number one, you have had sex before the puppy love has worn off, and two, you have bonded yourself not in a gross purity culture kind of way, but just hormonally, you have clouded your judgment slightly in being able to tell that this is a person who might not have your best interest at heart. To speak for myself, my husband and I actually waited to have sex until we were married. Now, this is for several reasons, and I do not recommend this to everyone. This is not an everybody thing. I think that this is certainly case by case, but the reason why we decided to wait to have sex until we were married was one, for religious reasons. Number two, we had a large age gap. We have a 9-year age gap, and we began dating when I was 18 and he was 27. We wanted to make sure that everything was above board, and he wanted to make sure that I felt as safe as possible, and the way that I decided to protect myself was keeping a very strong boundary around sex. It was my way to ensure that he was actually interested in me and not just interested in me for my body or for my age. We dated for 3.5 years before we got married, and I felt that that was a good amount of time. I really got to know him, and then we got married, and he made a very strong, specific commitment to me, and I felt comfortable then. But this was not only a me decision, this was a mutual decision, and he was on board with it, which is why it worked and functioned. Again, this is not for everybody, and there is absolutely no shame if you decide not to wait for 3 months or decide to not wait until you get married. Whatever works for you is what works for you. I want to make sure you are as informed as possible so that you don't end up in a relationship that is not in your best interest. Now, before we actually move on from the subject of sex and sexuality, I want to make sure that we discuss what is sex and sexuality for. This can vary widely depending on your beliefs. In my personal opinion, sex is meant for closeness and for intimacy. And if you have not really achieved that in your emotional relationship already, I recommend not moving forward with that part of your physical relationship. I believe that the emotional relationship should match the physical relationship. Next up is moving in together. Now, I just talked about how I did not have sex with my husband until we were married. We did actually move in together before we were married. We lived together for 6 months before we got married. Now, this is a discussion that is often brought up by family in the context of, well, if you move in together, you're less likely to actually stay together for the long haul, and you're more likely to end up divorced. While this is true largely, if you look at the data in a more specific way, you'll be able to see that people who move in together, it's the motivation that really matters when it comes to if the likelihood of divorce is going to increase or stay at a normal level. Keep in mind that the normal rate of divorce in this country is approximately 50%. Now, I believe that the divorce rate is so high because we largely do not seek out relationships for long-term team companionship. We often seek them out in momentary romance, and that's a whole other podcast. I could go on forever about that. Let's refocus. So, the likelihood of you moving in with someone and getting divorced. What is best? What gives you the best chances of staying together? So, according to the numbers, the best way to move in together is if you are motivated by a desire to further your relationship and see what it will be like to live with this person. Now, the way to not move in with somebody and the way to increase your likelihood of divorce is to move in with someone, one, gradually and kind of by accident, or number two, because it's financially advantageous. Now, when I say financially advantageous, that could be one of your reasons, but it's about your main motivation. If your main motivation for moving in together was, well, my lease is up and I have to find a place to live and the rent's so expensive in this city, so I guess we'll just move in together even though we've only known each other for 6 months. If that is your motivation, yes, your likelihood of divorce is increased, or the likelihood of not ending up together is increased. Now, if your motivation for moving in together is to deepen your relationship and get to know each other better, then your likelihood of divorce stays at the same rate. Another boundary that you can put in place, right? There are a lot of things that happen between having sex for the first time and moving in with someone. Typically, you'll probably have sex for the first time around 6 months is a good time, and then you might move in together at the 2 to 3 year mark. So in between that, the red flags that you want to be looking for, that this is maybe not someone that you want to team up with for life, is the way that they react to you setting up boundaries. So that first sexual boundary, that is a huge red or green flag depending on the way that they react to it. If they continue to push you and ask and ask and ask, that is a person that you do not want to build a life with. That is a person who will always be pushing and pushing and pushing you. That is a person who is not respecting you and your thoughts and feelings. Now, another kind of boundary or filter that you can put up to kind of see how they react to this to determine if you should move forward with the relationship is, of course, time. This is something I talked about in my last podcast, but I talked about it because it is important. If you have things about your life and about your schedule that are very, very valuable to you, and he decides to bulldoze those things, tell you that they're not important, tell you that you're not spending enough time with him because you're doing some stupid things that are for you, then that is not a person that you want to spend time with. As long as you are making plenty of time for them, as long as you're going on dates with them, at bare minimum once a week, you're seeing and talking to them frequently, there is no reason why this person should be communicating with you the way that they are. And the third thing that you can do, especially at the beginning of a relationship, and this is within the first year, within the first few months really, is communicating your relationship expectations. What do you expect out of this relationship? What do you expect out of the other person? Do you expect that they respond to your text messages in a timely manner? Do you expect to go out on dates frequently, more than once a week? Do you expect them to get you gifts? What is your love language? How do you expect them to communicate with you in the relationship? Now, the last milestone that I'm going to talk about today is joint finances. When should you do them? Should you ever do them? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks of joint finances? First, let's talk about the great things about keeping your finances apart. If you decide to keep your finances apart, you can work more collaboratively. Each person is responsible for a particular bill. Each person is responsible for their own money. You're able to buy gifts. The other person can't see where you bought those gifts, that kind of thing. It's particularly advantageous if you're somebody who is very independent and you are extremely interested in protecting your assets. Keeping your finances separate is a really, really great idea for anyone who makes quite a bit of money and wants to maintain control over their own financial health. Now, the benefits of combining your finances. Combining your finances means that they're all in one central location and you know what the money is being spent on. If you have all joint accounts, you can see what the other person is spending money on. You can see how much money you guys have total, just in case there is any debt that becomes an issue. When you get married, the benefit of having joint bank accounts is that debt begins to affect both of you, not just one of you, especially if you want to protect your interests and make sure that you are on any sort of home loans, or if you want to make sure that you are on any car loan or any financial venture. Being able to manage the finances as a whole is really beneficial. Another benefit to doing joint finances is if one of you is more confident about calling people about bills, about credit, and all of those things, you can have one person manage your finances. Now, I'm the person who manages the finances in our household, and that is because I'm more comfortable with calling creditors and people about bills. Money stresses me out, but it doesn't stress me out as much as it stresses out my husband. Now, when to combine your finances. So if you want to combine your finances, I would recommend waiting until you are engaged. I do not recommend combining your finances even if you live together before you get married. Now, really, above all, finances are integral to your survival as an individual. And the reason why I recommend not combining your finances until you are engaged is that you need to know that you can 100% trust this person if you are going to start combining your finances and your assets with them. Now, my husband and I put both of our names on vehicles that we purchased together because both of us input money to purchase the vehicle, and it helped me protect my own assets just in case something happened between us and the vehicle needed to be sold. My name was on it and I had claim to it. I recommend that even if you are not married and you decide to go into a lease together, make sure your name's always on that goddamn lease. If you decide to purchase a home together, especially before you get married, make sure that your name is on the mortgage. Make sure that your name is on the lease. Make sure that your name is on the mortgage. If something happens between you, you want to make sure that your assets are protected and that you are not going to be left with nothing. And that is a tip from my mother and grandmother who were married to people who were not great people. If there are more subjects that you want me to cover in this time when you are dating and engaged, please leave a comment below. I would love to cover anything that you are particularly interested in. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a podcast again. And if you are listening to me on Spotify, please be sure to follow. If this episode really, really spoke to you, I recommend joining my Begin Healing Your Hearts Facebook group. That is where I post all of the updates for everything that I do. If I post a YouTube video, if I post a blog, or if I post a podcast, I update you there. I also hold live morning mindset journaling sessions every single morning at 7 a.m. and I would love to see you there. I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.